I noticed years ago when I was in this church that when I saw angels in the church, they didn't really necessarily look like traditional angels that look very kind of humanesque with a pair of wings like that, but rather I saw beings that looked like they were covered in wings, covered in smaller wings that were like scintillating forces, scintillating field of life force that was in kind of continuous motion like that with wings all over it like that. And then it was sometime later that we had been to the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the more modern one, and they were showing books of ancient prayer books from the medieval time. And on one of the pages, there was an angel that looked like the one that I had seen in the church, that was just a being. Instead of looking like more the traditional form, it was this, there was like a face, and then it was just wings all around it and all over it. So I thought that was very interesting. And I realize now that over the course of the ages, a lot of the subtle perceptions that people have get a little bit mixed together, right? Like there's physical, there's the obvious physical. You know, she's got some blue and pearl and purple in the necklace there. That's pretty obvious. The hair is so long and so forth. But then just underneath, like the subtler forms of the body start to become, because they're more abstract and because a sense of perception are still learning to navigate those subtle areas, sometimes the perceptions start to kind of mix together a bit. But what I noticed was that particularly along the back of the body, there are many feather-like forms. They're forms that kind of, and I think we've talked about one of the shoulder area in past webinars, but there's also one at the hip area, and there's also one under the shoulder area at the bottom of the ribs, and all across, in fact, all across the back. There are these forms that are the interface between the physicality of the body and all the abstract field of the body, all that field of consciousness. And they have a kind of cornucopia shape to them, if that makes sense. So there's like a point. The points come in toward the cord of light and the spine, and the chakras, they connected to the chakras, and they're on the front of the body and they're on the back of the body, and they're levels of there's a level of the etheric body that's very like more abstract than the one that just looks like you only energy, that's just covered in these forms that look like cornucopia type flowers or feathers, you know, that come out like at the end of a trumpet, like the end of a trumpet, if you can imagine that. And these are denser expressions of consciousness than the threads of the astral field, and yet they are comprised of those threads. So you can imagine the streams or threads of the astral field that connect us to the web of life that's at a deeper, it's like a collective level of ourself. They're able to form into these lovely feather-like forms that are all through the etheric body and connect us to, but they work internally. They work internally. They connect the physicality of the body with the subtler layers of the body, the mind and the emotions and the astral and the causal levels of the body. So I think I've been talking for quite a while. Let's stop for a minute and do some healing. Now that we have a sense of what the etheric body looks like, we've got these very delicate feather-like structures at the deeper level of the etheric body, and that's the interface with the mental, emotional, etc. And then as the feather-like structures come to points, the points are like points of definition in the etheric body that show the actual form of the body. And for those who are new, just a reminder that the etheric body does shine outside. It's a little bit larger than the physical body. And so the etheric body radiates outward from the skin by a couple of inches. So if you're not sure about your etheric body, or you like to double check that from a subjective perspective, you can use your hand chakra, and you can just feel, put your hand chakra outside your arm like that, and you can feel the energy of the etheric body. If it's just a couple inches away from the physical body, you can actually feel the hand moving across the space of the arm. And so what's happening is the etheric energy of the palm of the hand is touching the etheric energy of the arm, and they're moving together. And you can feel your etheric body. So even though the etheric body isn't fully physical, it can be felt. Let's just look into the field of our etheric bodies. I was kind of excited to have such a big group tonight and to get a chance to kind of explore what everybody's etheric bodies look like and see what I see what's in there. Oh, and as I'm looking, I'm just starting to look, I'd like to say that in this healing webinar, today's and tomorrow's, I would like to cover two important aspects of the etheric body. One is the etheric body, which means the etheric as it is here in us, and the other is the etheric field. And it was really because of changes in the astral field that were affecting the etheric field that got this idea going that we should do a webinar on this topic. So there's a lot of exciting things to be said about the etheric field as well. So I'm looking forward to doing that too. Okay, looking into, now we'll start our healing. So the first thing that I'm noticing is a combination of the energy of that healing space, you know, that sort of deep, sweet feeling of self-trust and unconditional acceptance and love that activates in the heart. And by the way, I really felt that during our silence at the beginning of today's session as well. It was so beautiful, such a beautiful heart activation. And that within that fertile bed of unconditional love, the awakening of pure potential. Because everyone's pure potential is to be an exquisite expression of that source of creation, divine source. And that combination of the pure potential in the soft cocoon of total self-acceptance is extremely potent. And what it's doing is it's providing a platform to allow the senses of perception to perceive what the etheric body looks like. It's like the etheric body is hidden, right? Physical body shows on the surface, but etheric body is under the surface. And why it is under the surface? Because it's a little more tender. This I'm just learning as I'm going here. It's a little more tender than the physical form. The physical form, I mean, you could say, well, it's more abstract, so it's more flexible and stable, which indeed it is. But there's an element of also being closer to innocence, if that makes sense. It's a more, it's closer to divine expression. It's more pure. It has these qualities. And so it hides because it's one thing for each of us to look and see our own etheric body, but it's like that saying, the person holds their heart on their sleeve, you know that saying? And that usually indicates someone who maybe is like a little bit too much showing what's going on inside them, maybe in circumstances or situations that aren't appropriate to show that much emotion, something like that. So the etheric body has this quality of being a little bit hidden because it's almost like too beautiful, right? It's so beautiful. that if it were sitting out on the surface where everyone saw it, everyone would be like, oh, blinded, it's so beautiful, I can't look. The sweetness of the etheric body, sweetness of the etheric body. Oh, it's such a privilege also to have an expectant mommy in the audience. So we have two etheric bodies together at once, two bodies. It's very interesting to see that and the connections. Oh, it's beautiful. So much beauty and much sweetness there. And much, again, that sort of tenderness and innocence. And there's like a natural, this is something that I didn't know before, but there's like a kind of a natural form in the etheric body that's naturally self-protecting. It's very self-protecting. So what that means, then this is Dorothy inferring. I love to give you my inside reality as we're going along. So what that means is that there is an intimate connection between the immune system and the etheric body. Now, we've known for a while that there's an intimate connection between the astral body and the immune system, because the astral body is kind of like your first line of defense when you have exploitative energies that are at that very abstract level of creation. But the etheric body, it's more like a line of defense between the physicality of the world and then the softer, less manifest, but still manifest layers. Between the density, you could say the density or the crudeness or the grossness, if we want to use such words, of the physical material level of creation. I'm thinking maybe those words aren't so appropriate as we're going along, because our energy healing work is one of integrating the fine, beautiful, refined, exquisite, divine aspects of our consciousness into the physical, so that the physical will also glow or radiate with that refinement. So it doesn't have to be dense and gross. That was an assumption. So an assumption is cleared, actually. Right there, there's an assumption being cleared about the difference between the physical and the etheric level of the physiology. When the gates are open, then divinity shines through from the etheric to the physical without restriction. We like those gates to be open in just the right combinations, to bring forward just the right expression of our inner reality to the outer reality. Okay, so the next thing I'm seeing is that at the finer level of the etheric body, where it starts to interface with the mind and emotions, there's also something that looks like a protective mechanism. And this is natural and essential, because it's very natural for us as human beings to consider possibilities, right? You know, some situation we find ourselves, you're driving down the street in your car, you have to be alert and aware. We can't be dumb. The reason that we made it to this point in our evolutionary process is because our ancestors were careful and alert, right? They were paying attention to their environment, and they were considering possibilities, and they were thinking in a way that put safety first. As my father used to say, there are old rock climbers and bold rock climbers, but there are no old, bold rock climbers, because you have to put safety first in order to be a survivor. So safety first means at the mental and emotional level, anticipating and considering possibilities that may not be pleasant, right? So that means that the mind can look at a situation and go, oh, this is a potentially hazardous situation or dangerous, and the mind pictures the hazard. The mind imagines the hazard, and then logic kicks in or conscience kicks in, and we're like, oh, I think I won't put my hand on the stove, or, you know, I think I won't throw that ammonium nitrate, is that what that stuff was? Ammonium nitrate into the fire. How about we don't put a fireworks factory over a large body of ammonium nitrate. How about next time we do it better? We do it better. We do it better. So yeah, we have to be careful. We have to be careful, and we have to anticipate possible potential hazards and then take the steps to avoid those hazards. So what that means is that one of the things the etheric body does is it supports slowing down the relationship between what we think and what manifests. The etheric body sits in that place in our being that where we really experience the reality of time. We experience the slowing down of, because thoughts are just instant, right? So right in there, there's that ability to slow down. So what that means is the etheric body holds mechanisms that are particularly essential for managing time. Now we know that time's resource sits at the causal level of the physiology, right? There's a region of the causal body where all the laws of nature that oversee and administrate time are there at that very, very deep level, right next to the absolute. But the etheric body has the mechanisms that apply those laws of nature. So right now what's happening in our healing is that an integration is taking place between the etheric body and the causal body. And we're using time as our example, which is no surprise because we talked about time in the last webinar. I think it was the last one, time and Dharma. So there's these structures that regulate the slowing down of experience so that time is experienced as a sequential unfoldment of moments. This happens in the etheric body. That means that these mechanisms in the etheric body, and I'm looking, having our big group is just rich and wonderful because it gives me a chance to really see those mechanisms and how they vary from person to person and exactly where in the physiology and so forth. So these mechanisms, they sit, as I mentioned before, the etheric body ranges from sort of points of expression in the physicality of the form out to these sort of feather-like forms. And the feather-like forms, they're not like way out there. They're just more closer to the body. But I see the points that associate with time directly connected into the nervous system itself, particularly the inferior temporal cortex, and then down into the cord of light. So from the inferior temporal cortex, temporal is over here kind of by your temples, right? So it's kind of like in the side area here. That's the lower part. And that it goes, there's a line, there's a part of the etheric body that goes from the inferior temporal cortex down into the cord of light and right into the cord in the center of the body, and also into the central nervous system, the area of the central nervous system. And this is interesting. I mentioned before cornucopia shapes in the etheric body. So there's a cornucopia shape there that goes into the center of the being, and then it comes back out again, out into the hands and feet. And that's very interesting to me because what that indicates is that our understanding of time had some kind of original markings, like our original processing of the experience had to do somehow with the way we move in this world, like how long it takes to get from one place to another, or how long it takes to do something with the hands, something like that. And we also know, we know as musicians, those of us who are musicians, also know that tempos were born of the movements of the feet and the heart, and rhythms were born of the movements of the hands. So in music, the 3/4 time was given to us by our hearts that beat in 3/4 time, and the 2/4 and 4/4 timings were given to us by our feet. And then as people were walking along, walking and talking, breathing, and their hearts are beating, they were doing things. They were carrying things and making things and so forth. And so that produced the rhythms that overlay above the tempos. I say that because even though the cycles of time that we talked about before are very abstract, the interpretation of those cycles through our physiologies came as a byproduct of a kind of interface, but interplay between the subtle and the gross. And pretty much, and this is like the devata, we could say, of the etheric body is speaking now and saying, this is the other like fundamental significant role of the etheric body, is that because it connects the physical material level, the physical material level with the finest level of creation, it supports the ability for this sort of dialogue to occur between the surface of creation and the subtle level of creation. The etheric body acts as the liaison between these layers of creation. So as I'm speaking, basically what I'm doing is I'm just going in and I'm reading all this. This is all new information that's coming out as a byproduct of our collective awareness on the etheric body. And I'm so grateful, of course, but as it's coming out of me, as I'm describing it, it's also going in, it's also integrating. And that's precisely what the etheric body does, is it acts as the liaison between what's coming in through the senses of perception, in this case, your eyes and ears, because you're hearing me and seeing me, and the actual integration of that as a reality in the field of consciousness all the way down to the source of creation. It reflects, it's like a reflection back to the source of creation. And what that does is it speaks to the source of creation, each one of us being a point, like an antenna of the source of creation. And the information is speaking back into the source of creation, and it awakens the source of creation in a way it had not been awakened before. For one thing, it awakens Davic intelligence in the causal level of creation that were not previously awake, because our awareness is going into that causal level of our physiology at a particular angle it has never gone before. So that's number one. But then number two, because we as our healing collective are so powerful that all together we're reflecting this thing back, this knowledge, this wisdom, this understanding of the nature of our own etheric bodies, we're reflecting that back into the source of creation. What that does is it enlivens the source of creation in a way that has not been enlivened before. It tells the source of creation, we're ready. We have this. We own this thing now. We got this. And the source of creation is like, oh, look, all of your consciousness has expanded together in a way that had not expanded before, which means that if you're at the level of source, that the source of creation now has greater reign in the material level of creation, in the physical level of creation, has greater autonomy, it has greater means of expression. And what that does, it does several things. It creates a foundation for consciousness to expand. So we like it when consciousness expands, because more expanded consciousness is the foundation for greater fulfillment in life, better expression of pure potential. Yes. But also, as consciousness expands, as we have discussed in previous webinars, what that can also do is it can give a message to the field of creation that we are ready for bigger lessons as well. And when we learn a lesson, like a spiritual lesson, or we go through, an intense period, and as a collective, we've been going through an incredibly intense period this year, right? 2020 going down in history as one of the heavier moments in the history of our world. So as we go through these intense experiences, one of the things that energy healing does, it kind of comes to our rescue, is it provides a way to navigate those experiences with grace and comfort and ease and success. If we don't see it coming, if we are not engaged, then the experience comes and knocks us upside the head, right? And the next thing you know, there's some kind of trouble and it wasn't easy and you didn't feel like you had the resources to deal with it. But with energy healing, we're sliding underneath those mechanics that give rise, in this case, the etheric body, right? Like all these mechanics that sit between ideas and actual manifestation, they sit in the etheric body. So by understanding the etheric body, we're not only telling nature, okay, we get this area, so our consciousness is expanding and we're ready to learn more, but also it's providing the resources to handle next layers of lessons in a way that will be, I would say, that allows us to maintain our dignity, which is, in a nutshell, it's kind of a nutshell way of saying handling challenges and difficult lessons without pain and suffering, essentially. And that is absolutely possible. That is 100% totally possible.